her race by 1,017 votes, and her team is still bracing for a race that could end up that close. They, of course, are liking some of these numbers that they are seeing, but they were texting me saying it still could be a very long night. And her challenger, Don Bolduc, he came out here. He addressed the stage here and the crowd here. He actually led the group in some country music, and he said he's still holding out hope. Every team, both sides, really bracing for the fact that this could still be a nail-biter. You know, if she does pull this out, David, I have to tell you, I'm thinking a lot about my conversations with voters just today and how many women came out of the polling booth and said that they were voting on the issue of abortion. They did not believe that government had a role to play here. This is the live free or die state, and they hit that idea of freedom and wanting to make sure that a woman had a right to choose. David? Again, as Mary Alice Parks reports, Maggie Hassan there on the right, she had only won by 1,017 votes in 2016 when she was elected, hoping to win re-election tonight. We want to go to Ohio now, where the Democrat Tim Ryan is up against J.D. Vance in that state, both of them trying to fill Rob Portman's seat. Tim Ryan, look at this. This is a change since the last half hour that we checked. 67% of the vote in. Rick Klein's over at the big board. We're going to go to him in a second. He's going to talk about the blue mirage we were expecting earlier in the night. J.D. Vance now taking the lead in that state. We're going to ask Rick to show us some of the counties that explain why he's now in the lead. And in North Carolina, the Senate at this hour, you've got Cheri Beasley and Representative Ted Budd in that North Carolina Senate race. Before we go to North Carolina, you have it up on the screen now, Lily. 47. Ted Budd now in the lead there as well, 50-47. Again, this could be another case of the blue mirage in the beginning. We'll ask Rick. He's standing by on that. But first, Alex Brachet is in Ohio. And Alex, there had been so much talk that Tim Ryan was holding on early in the night here. Still early in this race, but doing better up against J.D. Vance than some thought he would. This was very tight going into this race, which for a Democrat in Ohio was something that they liked seeing. But again, they want to win tonight, like J.D. Vance does too.
That's right, David. I'm here at the GOP watch party tonight, and the theme tonight has been taking care of business. They've been playing that song all night. Obviously, an early win for Governor Mike DeWine, projected as the winner. But in the last half hour, we've seen J.D. Vance overtake Representative Tim Ryan. That is a race that has been closely watched here, and many voters that we've talked to for the last week telling us that race comes down to the economy.
Alex Brachet at Ohio. Alex, thanks so much. And as I mentioned, it's not just Ohio. Take another look at North Carolina, the Senate race we were talking about earlier. Didn't get a lot of attention, though the race was fairly close. Cheri Beasley had a lead in the beginning of the night. Now Ted Budd, the Republican congressman from a rural district, supported by former President Trump, now in the lead, 50-47. Again, another one of these cases where Rick is going to break this down for us. I want to get to Stephanie Ramos in North Carolina. Stephanie, Cheri Beasley's camp was excited early on, but they also knew this is the possibility of the way the night unfolds, given where they're bringing the votes in first.
Exactly, David. As you can see, the line dancing has stopped for the moment. A much more serious tone. They know that it's close, but folks here are keeping hope alive. And I have to tell you, the folks that we've spoken to here and across the state of North Carolina have maintained their key issues: abortion rights, inflation, and preserving democracy. I can tell you, last night I spoke with a couple at the Beasley campaign rally, her last rally, and they said that they voted for Beasley because they called the Republican opponent, Representative Ted Budd, just downright scary. And they said that is their most important issue: preserving democracy and civility. David.
Stephanie Ramos, part of our team, out all across the battlegrounds across the U.S. tonight in each one of these key Senate races. Steph, thanks to you. We'll come back to you shortly. We do have some projections that we can share with you at this hour. ABC News can now project that in Louisiana, John Kennedy, who was seeking a second term, has now been reelected to the Senate. There will not be any need for a runoff there. Senator John Kennedy returning to the Senate. In Oklahoma, in the governor's race, Governor Kevin Stitt, the incumbent, will serve another term as governor in that state. A tough battle with Joy Hoffmeister in the end. Kevin Stitt won. There have been some debates that made news, that viral moment talking about crime, but Kevin Stitt still wins despite the moment by Joy Hoffmeister that made so much attention. In the Senate race in Maryland, the incumbent Senator Chris Van Hollen seeking a second term. He's now been reelected. He'll return to the Senate. I do want to go back to these two states, Ohio and North Carolina. Rick, you've been watching them really closely, and you had also cautioned the viewers early in the night that depending on how a particular state counts counts the vote, it could look like an early lead for a particular candidate. And it would appear that's the case in both Ohio and North Carolina. It's now flipped.
Yeah, this is the reality of how people vote in America and how votes are counted in America. And you're starting to see a lot more election day vote come in. Just to give you a sense about the political geography of Ohio, these are the biggest counties in the state. They're all really blue. But guess what? You put everything back in there, very red. That's how J.D. Vance is starting to mount a lead over Tim Ryan. And what's interesting to me is when I look at the big population centers, I see Tim Ryan coming close, but not quite to where he needs to be in the 538 benchmarks, even out in Cincinnati, which is far from his home base. That's where J.D. Vance is from, and holding his own in Youngstown, his hometown. But man, there are a lot of Republican voters that are coming out tonight, registering disapproval with this president. You're seeing a lot of places where J.D. Vance is outperforming his number. Even though they're smaller counties, those numbers really add up.
What's interesting, I'm looking at the percentage that's in. So, for example, in Ashland, there, a rural county, 95% of the vote in, but some of these metropolitan areas where Tim Ryan is performing better, still just look at that, 52% of the vote in. So this could be a long night in Ohio still.
Yeah. Cuyahoga County, Cleveland rocks. It also is going to be pretty slow in counting the votes tonight. And this is going to be a reality in a lot of places. We've actually seen tonight a bit of a blue mirage early on where it looked like Democrats were doing better than the reality. And then you see kind of a red wave hitting over that. And now we're kind of see how the vote comes in some big cities, not just in Ohio, but also in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, to see if there's enough Democratic votes that are just taking longer to count. That is the reality of voting in America.
Donna Brazile, the fact that Tim Ryan's still in this game and you see these metropolitan areas still need a lot of vote coming in, what do you make of this?
Well, you know, I'm familiar with Franklin County. I'm familiar with, of course, Cuyahoga counties. But as you well know, there are some other pockets of Democratic support, Lucas County. I think this is going to be a good night for Tim because typically those big cities, those urban areas, and even some of the counties outside those areas will pick up votes as the night goes on. So Tim should be proud of himself.
What do you
make
of this, Governor Christie?